So thank you everyone for joining me for today's APA 7th edition presentation webinar here. My name is Carlos Jimenez. If you're not familiar with who I am, I'm the manager of writing support. I've been here for about 6.5 years, helping students with various aspects of their writing. Also, I also work in dissertation clearance, so I help our doctoral students prepare their manuscripts for publication. So at the end, after the doctoral students complete their final oral defense, is when they submit their work to me, and I help them to ensure, well, I have a team, of reviewers that help to ensure the manuscript is ready for publishing. So that includes formatting guidelines from our university, GSCP institution, and also the APA 7th edition updates. Well, previously it was 6, but now we moved to 7. So that is a big component of what I do here. So I'm pretty knowledgeable, I would say, about the 7th edition and just APA in general, and because primarily it is a big part of what I do here on a daily basis. So I just wanted to first move to where you can find these resources. So all of the materials that I'm presenting, this PowerPoint, we do have a handout on the major 7th edition updates and some other resources. Primarily where you can find the materials are on our writing support webpage. And I will show you, I'm gonna share my screen here. So if any of you have any questions along the way or anything, feel free to chime in with the chat, or you can also unmute yourself there and if you'd like to speak or have a question. So here primarily is where you can find many writing resources that we have available. The writing support webpage, I can add the link to the chat. Basically, the easiest way would be our bit.ly. So there's the bit.ly site there, the link to this web page. And if you click on these toggle widgets, these toggles, you can see all of the resources here for APA format. So you'll see the general PowerPoint tutorial that we have updated with the most recent updates with 7th edition, but it's going to give you a general introduction to all of the basics of APA, including types of references and the system of using the author date for citing your sources and creating a reference list, and also incorporating those sources in your papers and your writing assignments. This is a crib sheet, this APA 7th reference and citation guide, which is a very helpful tool that it's a resource that has a lot of the most common reference types, including some examples of citing. There's an APA style site for you. This is the link to the help page, and we can go there in just a minute because there are a lot of great sample papers that you can download. Here's a resource on just the 7th edition updates, which we will cover momentarily. Also a sample student paper that is also, this is the Microsoft Word version of the sample paper that is on the APA style site. And there are some videos here, and these videos were done by our assistant manager of writing support, Julie Stegmeyer. So she created some videos that help with identifying some of the new 7th edition updates and some specifics there. Also, she has a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to. If you click on this link here, she's got some great material there that she created, focusing on a number of writing issues, including APA, grammar, plagiarism, all kinds of great topics. So shout out to Julie for creating this page, and it's available for you to access 24/7, all available for you here. And if you click on the webinar videos page, this is where you'll find all of our recorded videos, and I will be posting the 7th edition video here momentarily. This links to Julie's page right now, but we'll be replacing that with this recorded webinar. So our resources page is where you're going to find all of these downloadable materials and resources there. But like I said, I will send you the materials directly for those who attended today's presentation, and I'll also send you the recording. So any questions about any of our resources? Maybe the link does not work. That bit.ly doesn't work. I could try to, you can try punching in this complete URL. That one doesn't work. You can try that direct link to the page. Okay, so primarily when we're talking about APA, you know, we're taking everything from this 7th edition. You know, you can buy this directly if you go to the APA style webpage. You can find a lot of, you can buy the manual directly here, you know, going to products. This is the 7th edition. I purchased the ebook, so I have an ebook version. It was about $35.99. You know, very helpful in the digital format, but you know, you can purchase the hard copy. There's a spiral bound version which has sections, divided sections. I find that the ebook pretty easy to navigate through, and as I'm copying and pasting a lot of the material to help students, you know, identifying some rules. But, you know, if you don't have, if you're not able to purchase the 7th edition manual, you can also go here, you know, of course, to our writing support resources on our webpage, but also this style and grammar guidelines page here. And if you click on any of these different headings, they'll lead you to information that's covering many of the basics of what the actual manual includes. You know, these are abridged versions, but you'll notice here in particular, the sample papers page here under format. So if you click on the sample papers page, you can see there is an example of a student paper and a professional paper, and one is annotated. So it has, you know, arrows with boxes that will highlight certain types of features on the page, on the sample. Also, there's a lot of identification of different types of citation examples. So it's very helpful. And also you just have the student sample papers as Word docs by themselves. So I know someone in the RSVP in the notes, they were asking for like a template, if we would create a template for the APA formatting, an APA formatted paper. So if you download either the student sample paper or the professional sample paper, you will have a lot of those, the formatting already embedded in the doc, in the sample. So I would suggest downloading these, and so you can already have that there. You can even create a new document according to the template that's existing, you know, there. So that will help. There's not too much new formatting now that needs to be done because a lot of the new changes eliminated some of the unnecessary technical aspects, like separating your header and creating the running header and things like that. So we'll look at some of those in specific detail there. But here is where you can download the Word version, or they have the PDF with annotations there for the sample papers. But this style and grammar guidelines page has all kinds of different topics from all different examples of in-text citations. Also style, you know, chapter 6 is a huge chapter that really goes into detail. So if you are a dissertation student, or even in general, you're looking for, you know, how do we utilize punctuation effectively? How do we express numbers or particular symbols? How do we use italics or quotation marks? You know, all kinds of different topics. Here is going to give you some general information, but there's nothing like the actual source. You know, I would recommend getting the APA manual, you know, purchasing a copy of the manual just for you, for if, you know, it's going to help. All of your papers as a Pepperdine student have to be in what we call APA style or APA format. So it's just going to be very helpful resource for you. Also, you know, if you may want to take one of your research papers that you did as a student here and want to turn it into a submission for a journal article or something like that, or conference presentation, you know, you will already have a leg up as far as formatting expectations and style expectations for that particular journal, and also your dissertation, right? So if you're a doctoral student working on your dissertation, or maybe you might think of that in the future, the APA manual obviously is going to be a real significant help for you as you work on that. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and switch back here to this PowerPoint. But before we start with this PowerPoint, let's look at the particular 7th edition updates. So in particular, these are some of the most significant changes or updates that we have in the 7th edition. So, you know, if you're familiar with the 6th, you'll see some of these things have been changed here. For example, this running header that often a lot of students would have trouble with creating it. You know, it has to display one particular view on the title page, and then on the other pages, it's not. So now you can just eliminate the running header for the student papers. They do in the professional papers, they do want you to put the running head there. But for purposes of writing a paper here at Pepperdine University, GSEP, you won't need to have that. You won't need to have that running header any longer. And on the title page, most of the same elements. You know, you're always going to have the page number in the upper right corner in the header. So you can actually click in the header area, which is at the top of the document, and then you will insert the page number there. And on the actual title page, it wants the bolded title now in the top of the page. So you're going to center your title, you're going to make it bold, and you'll notice, let's see, so I want to make sure if everybody can see the screen. Can everybody see the 7th edition updates? Maybe hit yes if you're able to. Someone was saying that it was blurry. So maybe for the student that said it was blurry, you might want to come out and come back in. That might help with the view. But I'm getting yes, so everybody can see that clearly. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going. You might want to exit in the room and then come back into the meeting. That might help with the view. So your title is going to be at the top of the page. It's going to be bolded. You're going to find there's 2 types of capitalization that they talk about in the manual, or we use title case, and then we use sentence case. So title case just means you're going to include the content words. You're going to capitalize the main words of the title. All of the function words, maybe like prepositions or articles, those will stay lowercase, but you're going to capitalize the main words, or we call it in title case there. It's bolded, and then it just wants your name of school, university, maybe the course name and the instructor's name and the date. So all of these things will be double spaced, centered toward the middle of the page there. And the heading levels are a little bit different. They kind of simplified the heading levels. So your first level heading, which is not the title, but your first level heading is going to be centered on the page in bold and in title case. And then we'll look at some real examples when we look at the sample page. But your second and third level headings are both going to be flush left. The only difference, and they are in title case, the only difference is just if it's a level 3 heading, you're going to italicize it. But you'll notice now everything is bold, all headings 1 through 5. There should be a maximum of 5 levels of heading. But you'll notice 2 and 3 now are flush left. they are bold, and they are title case, and headings 4 and 5 are the same. Heading 4 is just indented with the paragraph. So you would begin, so just like in the previous edition where 3, 4, and 5 were all indented along the same line as the new paragraph, 4 and 5 are going to be that way. But they are going to be in title case, and heading 4 is bold and heading 5 is italicized. So they kind of simplified it a little bit, but these are the new changes as far as headings. So it's just going to take a little while to get used to this new kind of formatting, and just basically it's memorizing. If this is new to you, then you won't have to change because once we have things already repeated and we have a system for things in place, it's kind of difficult to make these changes. But once you get used to it and write a few papers, then it should become more natural to you. Also, inclusive language. So they are encouraging the use of the singular they. So when referring to a person whose gender is unknown or irrelevant. So sometimes it was, I always remember it was always like he, she, or he/she to determine something in the third person. But now you can use this plural, they, even when you are referring to a singular. So for example, each participant, even though this is technically in grammar terms, in English grammar, it's a singular noun, we're still using the pronoun there for the referent there. Even so, if you refer to it as single, like a child, we would still use themselves. Or here's another example of a specific person, and we use the plural there. Okay, style-wise, for quote, they would recommend using quotation marks rather than italics to indicate examples. So, like a coined expression or a slang term like fake news would be in double quotes. So you'll want, also there's an extensive section on the use of double quotation marks and italics and some of those features, some of those style features in the APA manual. So, this is just a shortened version. This is by no means extensive as far as all of the different rules and stylized rules, but these are just some of the major changes. There was, well, as in the 6th, the numbers 10 and above are always expressed as numerals unless you have them at the beginning of a sentence. So if they're at the beginning of the sentence, then, excuse me, they're written out. But at all costs, you do want to avoid starting the sentence with the number. So citations, they kind of simplified the system of citing here. If you, as in the previous edition, if you are discussing ideas from a single source within a paragraph, you typically only need to cite once within the paragraph. I would say if the ideas, if it's a larger paragraph, to still incorporate, citations periodically when the ideas are not of your own, just to make that distinction. But one major change as far as citing is the use of et al. So before, right, in the 6th edition, when you had authors 3, 4, or 5 of a single source, right, you would have to write all of those authors out in the first citation, and then you would use the abbreviation et al. In subsequent citations. So now they simplified this so that you can use the abbreviation et al., which just means and others, right, in Latin. You can use that after the first author's name in every citation where you have 3 or more. So if the source has 1 or 2 authors, you're going to include all of them in every citation. But if it has 3 or more, you can use this et al. Abbreviation. So here's an example. There's 2 types of citations that we have, right? There is a parenthetical citation, which just means that the citation is inside parentheses, right? So you're explaining the idea. You're not mentioning the name of the author or authors as part of the sentence. That goes usually following the end of the thought inside parentheses there. But a narrative citation is incorporating the author or authors' names as part of the sentence. So in this instance, Smith et al., and you would put only the year in parentheses following the last name of the source, or et al., and then you have your main verb. So these are two examples of different types of citations. But you can use now this et al. Abbreviation for 3 authors or more in every single citation. Okay, so there were some changes to the reference types. So some of these, like books, for example, there is no location required for the publisher. So before, there used to be a city and state abbreviation. I think this is probably because we have a lot of publishers that have many different locations. So in a book, you might have some conflicting information there where you might see one location and another, but you only need the name of the publisher, and we'll look at an example, a specific example of that. But there is no city or state needed in the publisher information there for a reference to a book. For one kind of odd addition here is for if you have a source of 20 or more authors. So you might, there might be a source where you have a huge author list there, but it wants you to include all 19 if you do have something that's 21 and more, and then use these ellipses and then the last author before that. So there was a rule about 8 or more authors in the last edition, where you only needed to cite the first 7 and then the last. But now you want to include up to 20 names of the authors for a particular source. One thing about the DOIs and URLs. So the DOI, if you're not familiar with the DOI, it's called the Digital Object Identifier. And so you will see now most of all of your electronic sources, journal articles in particular, peer-reviewed journal articles, will always include now this DOI. And it's just a hyperlink. It's now like a live URL link that'll just take the reader directly to the source online. So it's just an easy means of retrieving that source. If someone looks at your references, and they can easily see the link there, the DOI link, and that will take them to that article online. So now they want you to make this as a live link. So before, we used to say no underline, all black, but now, and it's this new format, this HTTP format here, which just is almost like a live link. If I clicked on that, it will take me directly to the source. And that just goes at the end of the reference entry. And so now they want you to use this DOI hyperlink. This labeled DOI is no longer used, not to say that you can't use it. So before it was a lowercase DOI with a colon, and then they had it starting with this 10 point. This is the actual DOI, this portion of the string. You can still use that, but they prefer to include this hyperlink format, the DOI. If you don't have a DOI and it's from a website, we don't really want database info at all anymore. Well, it always discouraged against it, but now they don't want it at all. So you want to, if you have a URL for the reference that can be, that's directly accessible to the site, then you want to include that at the end of the information of the reference entry. The term retrieved from, the phrase, is no longer necessary. So you don't need to put the retrieve from. The only time you would is if a retrieval date is necessary. 95% of your sources that you've gathered online won't need a retrieval date. There are some exceptions. Sometimes if there's content from a source that changes over time, if the web page might be updated, it's not a static page, then they want you to include a retrieval date. So you would have retrieved and the date that you accessed the content, and then from and the URL there. So most of the academic research databases, that's going to be most of the source that you're getting these articles from, but you're not going to include the database information in your reference entries, right? Because we don't want to include the database information, because It's not for everybody. You know, you're a student of Pepperdine, so you have access to those databases, but not the general public. You know, the general public might need to have some kind of subscription or something. So that's one reason, you know, we can't access it. Also, because within that database you have thousands and thousands of different journals, so it's not as accurate. It won't lead us directly to that source. So if you did get it from a database and it's not something specific like an ERIC, if it doesn't have like an ERIC location number, there are a couple of others, but you should just omit the database information and treat it like it was a printed version. So it's not so much that they're concerned with whether you had a print version or whether you got this from online, but it's just locating the source. So database information is not going to be sufficient for that. So you can avoid that, including that information. And one more thing about websites, because you know we know a lot of your sources are going to be from the web and from web pages. If you did get the source from a website, you want to include the website name in the source element, so in the location information. So the elements are just each different piece. We'll look at the different elements that make up a reference entry, but it wants you to include the website name and followed with the period, and then follow with the actual URL or the link. Okay, so some resources here. Obviously, like I mentioned, the APA website here. There's the sample APA 7th edition, and there's this video here from Scribbr.com that has a nice video about all of these changes that you know I just mentioned. And so you know you're encouraged to check these. As I mentioned, you can find this document on our writing support page, and I will also send it to you at the conclusion of the webinar. So can I answer any questions? What type of capitalization is used for reference citations? That's a good question, and that's what we will take a look at next. And there are two types of capitalization. Like I said earlier, no problem, but like I said earlier, there's two type of terminology that you want to get familiar with. We have title case and we have sentence case. So sometimes we're using title case where we're capitalizing the major words in the heading or the title, and then other times we're going to use sentence case. And it just takes a matter of pretty much memorizing here and in order to identify what capitalization you would use for what particular reference type. Okay, so if there are anybody else have any questions about the 7th edition updates, we might go through some of these, might answer some of them as we go through this general piece here, but go ahead and jump in on the chat. I'm checking the chat as I'm presenting here. So like I said, these elements of the title page, just to kind of review, there's some kind of sound effects here, but now we're going to have the page number there in the upper right corner. The title is bold and in title case, and then the author, university, maybe class, instructor name, and title. So when you think about references, you want to include these elements, and this is what I mean by source elements. Each of these we would classify as an element, as a source element. So the who, which is the author, right, or the organization, if there's no specific person. The when, the year of the publication or the year that the page was updated. The what, right, the title of the work, and then you have the where, so the name of the publisher or the hyperlink to the URL or the DOI there. Here is a sample reference page. So you'll notice that everything is double spaced. We want 1-inch margins on all sides. The whole paper should be double spaced, 1-inch margins. You'll notice the indentation here where, whoops, let's go back. You'll notice the indentation here. This is called a hanging indent. So all of your sources by the author, by the first author's name, they're going to be flush left, that first line, right? But every other line that's associated with that reference is indented. So when you go into your Microsoft Word software and you're creating your reference list, you'll want to make sure that you go into your paragraph settings and include and check the hanging indent. So it's very simple. You go into your paragraph settings, and I would do this right away when you're creating this page, so that way it'll automatically make that formatting adjustment. And also every reference, you're going to alphabetize it according to the first author's name of each source. So B would come before F, and then here this last one is an example of a source with no author's name, and we'll get to that. But so you'll notice some different capitalization. We'll show you, this is first example is a chapter in an edited book. This next Fishman source looks like an article, a journal article, an electronic journal article. Then we have a book here, and then it looks like another journal title without any author's name. So we'll go into some detail about some specific reference types and some of those rules. So some helpful hints here: only the major publication for each entry is italicized. So think of it in terms of the article title is not italicized, but the actual journal title itself is. And also you'll notice the capitalization. So the article title capitalization is sentence case, where the actual journal title is title case. Okay, everything is double spaced throughout, except dissertations, because you might have, many references, so they allow you to single space within. Capitalization rules are going to depend on the type of reference. We'll look at some examples. And you have the hanging indent, which only the first line of the source is flush left, everything else is indented. And now we want to use the hyperlinks for URLs and your DOIs. So here's an example of a book. So you'll notice all of the source elements. The who is Clifford. You're going to use the last name with the comma followed by the initial. First initial, sometimes authors use two names. So then in that case, you'll have both initials. Space the initials apart. Okay, everything should be spaced. And then you'll have the year of the publication of the book in parentheses there, followed by a period. Then you have the title. So you have the title. You'll notice this title is in sentence case. So the R in the first word is capitalized. They have this title has a subtitle, right? So there's a colon here. So the very word after the colon there is going to be capitalized, and everything else is lowercase. So this would be an example of sentence case. This is italicized. If there's additions, you want to include the addition information that goes after the title in parentheses there, followed by a period. And then you have the name of the publisher there, Harvard University Press. So this is a book example, pretty common source, pretty common reference type that you will encounter. Article in a magazine, pretty much the same way. All of those, every source is going to have the same elements, right? So we have the who. This was Stein. Then we have a little bit more specific of a when, because this is a daily periodical. So you have the year with the comma followed by the month and day, and that is placed in parentheses followed by a period. Then you have the title of the article, Asia's Diaspora. So you'll notice the sentence case for the title of the article, and then that's followed by a period. And then you have the name of the publication, which is the New Yorker, italicized, title case, and you'll have the page range as well, 40 to 45. So that is identifying specifically where we can find this article in that New Yorker issue. And then you have the link to the newyorker.com there. As a text citation, this would be a parenthetical citation. You're going to use the author year system, right? Author surname, comma, followed by a year. And that would be for anything that you're paraphrasing, right? We'll get into the formatting if you were directly quoting. Sometimes you might have sources where you don't have a particular author. This could be a little bit tricky, you know, if there's an organization name or an institution name, or sometimes the website is the author, you can use those as the author name. But if you can't find it anywhere, then you can move the title of the source to the author position. So in this case, you would order this in your reference under D, but we're including the name of the title there. That would go in the author position. So it's the sentence case, and the complete title is there. Then you have the year, month, and day, and then you have the New York Times publication there, title case, italicized, and then the link there. If you're going to cite it, then you don't need to include the entire title. You can just put the first word or two. You put that in quotations followed by the year. If multiple authors, we have a question. It says, did you say if multiple authors to alphabetize them by last name, even if they're listed on the article in a certain order? So no, you don't want to deviate from the order that they are listed in an article. So what I meant by alphabetize them was just by the first name of the source. So if you have Jones, Smith, and Johnson, you're going to put the order in the references where Jones would be in that alphabetical order. So you're not going to switch the order that they're listed in the source. You never want to do that, because then, you know, you want to make sure that for whatever reason that author was placed first. Maybe they did most of the work, or, you know, who knows, but you don't want to deviate from that order. So you just want to go by the very first author of that source, and then that's where you alphabetize it in your reference list. Most of your sources are going to be these, right? Electronic issues of journal articles. Most of the time they're going to have the DOI, unless it's maybe backdated. But all of the source elements are the same, right? The who, this one has two authors, right? So you have Cole and Bedian. You'll notice the ampersand symbol. So instead of the and, you're going to use this ampersand. Followed by the year. Then you have the title of the journal article, Leadership Consensus as a Cross-Level Moderator. You'll notice the title of the journal article is in sentence case, but the actual journal title here is italicized and in title case. You also want to include, when it's available, the volume and issue number, right? So the volume number here is italicized. The issue number is placed directly after it in parentheses there, right next to it. 99% of the time you'll have a volume number. You might not have an issue number, but if you don't, then you just put a comma there, and then you have the page range for where I can find the article, because, you know, we know in these journals there are tons of articles with different authors, so you're highlighting the particular article that you are citing from. And then you have the link here, this DOI, as a hyperlink. In a text citation, in a parenthetical citation, you would include both authors, use the ampersand symbol, and the year there. Sometimes if you don't have a DOI and you can't find it on the database page, there's this really easy DOI lookup service from crossref.org. Very simple to use. You can literally, I can copy this whole reference entry and just paste it into a query and hit submit. And if a DOI exists for it, it will appear. And it's free for students. You just need to put in, you know, your institution email. And it's from crossref.org, a simple text query that will help to identify a DOI or find one if it exists. You know, if there is no DOI, you might have gotten it from a web page, from a website. If that URL is available for the actual journal's homepage, then you put that there. But all of the other information is the same. You know, the author's last name, first initial with the year, the title in sentence case, the title of the journal in title case, volume, issue number, and page range there. Here's an example of a narrative citation, right, where you would signal the author's name and the year, and then you would have some key verb there. And if you incorporate that as part of the sentence, then you don't have to include the citation at the end of that idea, of that thought. Chapters in the edited book. This is another pretty common reference type here. So you're going to include the author's last name. You're going to include the title of the chapter here, which is in sentence case. And you also want to include the author, the editor's information. So in H.L. Roediger, this was the editor. You have a capital E for editor, lowercase e is edition. Then you have followed by the title of the book. So the complete book is italicized, sentence case, and the page range. You'll notice the PP here, they want in parentheses for the page range of that chapter. If you are citing it with the direct quote, always remember that any directly quoted text, you want to include the page number where we can locate that quote. Dissertations, you might have dissertations, you might be citing from dissertations. This is where you can use the database information, but you'll notice the title of the dissertation is in italics and it's sentence case. There's a publication number. There's usually a number available associated. And then you always want to give a descriptor. If it's like non-routine information, you can put that in brackets there, doctoral dissertation and the university, and then you have the database. Internet only sources, you want to always include it. It's the same way as you would do any source, right? The who, the when, the what, the where. So the title of the document, the date of the posting, and the hyperlink there. You want to try to look for the document names, not the home or menu pages, and you want to check your URLs. You might have government reports. So if you do have a report from a website, use the government agency or the organization as the author there. You'll notice this has a year and a month there. The title there is italicized in sentence case, and then the link there. Don't put any periods on the end of your URLs because that might affect the link. It might make it broken. So you want to check it for the easiest way is to copy and paste the link directly. If there's no author listed, you can use the institution as the author. Like I said, like here, Pepperdine University, there's no dates. Sometimes, you know, look at the bottom of the web page. You can see a lot of times you will see the date there when the page was last updated. But if there isn't anything in there, no date, then you could use the n.d. there. And then you have the title of the page there, the document, and then the link. If it's a direct quotation, so you'll notice the abbreviation para. So this would be used if something doesn't have page numbers. So APA just says to provide another way of locating the quote. So whether it's a heading or a section, sometimes there might be a heading name, and then you can use like discussion section, comma, para 3, or, you know, just the paragraph number itself, or both. You know, there's some options there that you have that the 7th edition really has more detail on ways that you can cite without page numbers. But generally, you know, you can use this abbreviation para if you can see paragraph numbers that are separating there, or even if there's no numbers there, if you can clearly see paragraphs that are separated, you can use that. So yeah, retrieve from is no longer needed, only when you have a date that you need to include, like when you access this. So like the US Census Bureau might be not a static page, so they want you to use this retrieval date in the reference entry. But if the date itself is not available on the page when it was updated or anything, then you'll use this ND. Dictionary, this is a different, this is kind of new from the 6th edition, is they used to highlight the word in the author position, but now they want you to use the author, the Merriam-Webster, as the author position there, if you're going to have a dictionary entry. Annual reports or fact sheets, these are just some other types of sources there, but all of the basic formatting is the same, right? So you have the name of the organization, the year, the title of the document, typically italicized. If it's a standalone document, you know, if it's not a part of any other larger piece, then you're going to look to italicize. If it's one document in part of another document or a larger piece, then you're not italicizing. That's typically the general rule that you want to follow. These are some examples here. If it's non-routine information, like I said, like a fact sheet or something, you can put that in brackets after the title there. And then here's the example of that 6th edition reference change, a journal article with the DOI, more than 20 authors. You're going to list the first 19 and then use ellipses and then add the last author. But all of the other information would stay the same. So here's some, you know, links there. Like I said, the APA style website, which has a lot of downloadable resources, finding a DOI here in this crossref.org, and beginning on page 13 of the 7th edition manual, you have an extensive list of all of these different types, you know, and different formatting guidelines there. But those were the most common, I would say, types there that you will encounter. So this PowerPoint goes on a little bit further, and it talks about citing, you know, different examples of citations, but I want to go to the sample paper. So, and the sample student paper that's annotated is a helpful example here. Everybody can see that. So this is taken directly from the manual as an example. This is on page 62. This was a downloadable resource here. So you'll notice some features of a student paper here, right? You'll have the page number there in the top right. The title there is in bold. It's toward the top of the page in title case. Then you have all of the student information, the author information, the department, you know, the class name, the teacher's name. You'll notice that the title is repeated on the next page in bold. So it used to not be in bold, but now it's bold. And the heading itself, you don't have a heading until the 3rd page. So they generally don't require an introduction heading. So you don't have to have you don't have to have a heading that says introduction there. But you know, the first page or so is this student's introduction. And I like the annotation because it kind of shows different features, different types of citations. Like, for example, here, American Psychological Association, that's an example of a group author. Then you have a parenthetical citation with 2 authors. You have a use of italics, right, to indicate a key term. So it really goes in and it does a good job of identifying, you know, different types of citing. Here's one where you have an additional idea of the same source there. So repetition. There is a use of the first person that can be used there. So, and then on this next page, here's where you can kind of see some of the headings, right? So the main heading, this level 1 heading is guided imagery. And then you have these level 2 headings, or these are subheadings there, flush left, title case, and in bold there. There's another example here of seriation. So if you're using a list of items, if you're listing items within a paragraph, it wants you to use these lowercase letters inside parentheses, A, B, and C there. And here's an example of a short quote. So, you know, always include the page number, and you want to include that full citation at the end of the directly quoted text. Here are here's an example of a narrative citation, but they're including the same. So you see here the name of the author and the year are used here to indicate that where the idea is coming from. And then they're using the same source, this Holden Lund. So they don't need to put the year again. So that only happens when it's consecutive. You know, when you have the next few sentences that are the same source, you don't need to put the year again. Where can you find this paper with annotations on it? You can find it on the APA style website. So the one that we have on our webpage, on our writing support webpage, does not have these annotations. But in the beginning of the presentation, went to apastyle.org. And so you can find, you go to sample papers and you will be able to find this with the annotations here. Okay. Does anybody have any questions that maybe I can answer regarding any of the content?
I just have one question.
Sure.
So on the cover page, even though there's no running head, you don't even put the title in caps?
In caps, no more caps. So this just, you're just going to give the title in title case and bold toward the top. This should be the format for the student paper. So all of the instructors, you know, we sent out all of the new information about the 7th edition updates. We encourage the instructors to use, to adhere to the 7th edition, you know, for all of the student papers and things. So you just want to check with the instructor, you know, to make sure that they're following the 7th edition. But from moving forward now, it should all be, you know, 7th edition. But, you know, you do want to check with the instructor. But yeah, there's nothing in caps anymore. Nothing in caps anymore.
You mean even in the running head on the second page, the title's not in caps, or you just don't put the title up there at all? Because all I saw was on the cover page, the page number 1 on the right-hand side.
Yeah, but that's it. So there's no header anymore. You remove the header altogether.
Oh, so just don't even put a header at all on any of the pages?
Nope, not for student papers.
Okay, so the only thing up in the header is the page number and it's right aligned?
Yep.
And so it starts on page 1?
Mm-hmm, exactly. Okay. Yeah, so you should go into the header area and then just insert page number and it would be all the way to the right. Yep, and if you set your margins to 1 inch, then you should be fine within the 1 inch. Yeah.
Okay, and then no title up there ever on any of them?
Nope, you're only going to have the title on the title page and then the very next page before the very first paragraph of the paper.
Got it. Okay, I didn't know that. That's what I was trying to figure out.
Yep,
Thank you.
That's new. Yeah, that's the new update. They eliminated that header because it's really unnecessary if you think about it. The original purpose for the header is, you know, like if you're submitting it to a journal. So if you had a paper that you were going to maybe try to get published in a journal, then they use that header as like a blind copy. So they take your name out of it and they're reading it. So they use that header to like keep the pages organized. So that was the reason why they had the header. So we don't need to do that for student purposes. So they eliminate that altogether. So it takes the heading out of creating the header. Period.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. So there's another question. You're welcome. If you have to go, we're going to be nearing about 6:30. We'll probably end, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. There's one more about a period inside or outside of quotes. So, well, that depends. You're never going to put the period inside the quotation marks. So if you look at an example here, there's probably an example of a text citation here. So you'll notice here, this sentence, if you could see that, it says, guided imagery and relaxation techniques have even been found to reduce distress and allow the immune system to function more effectively. So the end quote mark there is after the last word that's quoted, and then you have the citation, which comes after, and then the punctuation comes after the citation. So the period will never be inside, unless maybe you have a comma, there's punctuation. Quoting a client. So yeah, so if there's no citation, then you are correct. So like if you have quoting a client, or if you have like in a dissertation chapter, you'll have like participants of your study. So you'll quote them, then you would put the punctuation inside. Yeah, but if you have a citation where you're quoting a direct quote from an outside source, then you put the citation information in the period. But if it's like you know, I guess participant quotes, or maybe like a slang term or an expression, then the punctuation does go inside. But just remember, anything that you take from an outside source is considered directly quoted material, and so you wouldn't include a citation. The only time you wouldn't, with punctuation where it goes before the citation, is like a block quote. So that's like here, anything that's 40 words or more needs to be displayed in a block quote format, and you'll notice the punctuation goes inside before the citation. So that's the one thing there with punctuation. Easy way to think about it would be, you don't want to leave that citation hanging outside. Exactly, right? That citation should go, it should be clear that that citation is associated with that quote or that idea, right? So then the punctuation would go after that. For the block quote, well, that takes out that reasoning there. I don't know why the punctuation goes before, but that's how they want it formatted there. But a block quote is, everything is indented almost like a new paragraph, and there's no quotation marks. So that's one example, one thing about a block quote, where you don't have any quote marks and the punctuation goes inside. The APA 7th, the citation and reference guide that we have, has a clear example too of a block quote for you there. So are there any other questions that maybe I can help with? Yeah, if you if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email went to you when I sent you the RSVP emails. My email is my name, carlos.jimenez at pepperdine.edu. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And so I'll just put that there. But if there's nothing else, thank you all for attending this webinar, and I hope you found some of these things very helpful. And like I said, we'll be posting the link to the webinar on our events, on our videos page, and I'll also send this directly to all of you who attended and RSVP'd. So thank you all, and have a great evening.